For years, one platform defined how the world interacted with artificial intelligence, not because it was flawless, but because it became the default. ChatGPT didn't just answer questions. It shaped habits. Search behavior changed, workflows shifted, and for a long time, nothing came close. Then something quietly changed. There was no crash, no scandal, no public failure. Just a slow shift in attention. Alternatives stopped feeling experimental. They started feeling usable. And when attention moves, power follows. Inside OpenAI, that signal was impossible to ignore. Because competition wasn't trying to replace ChatGPT directly, it was surrounding it. Search results, documents, phones. Intelligence was no longer asking users to come to it. It was meeting them where they already were. So on December 11, 2025, OpenAI responded. Not with words, with a release. They called it GPT-5.2. This wasn't a routine update. It was a warning. The AI war had moved past experiments, and it was about to get serious. Why OpenAI could not wait. OpenAI did not release GPT-5.2 because the world demanded it. There were no protests, no complaints, no sudden crises. From the outside, everything looked fine. They released it because the market quietly applied pressure, and quiet pressure is far more dangerous than loud noise. For years, OpenAI enjoyed something rare in technology: dominance without urgency. ChatGPT wasn't just popular, it was habitual. People opened it automatically. Teams built workflows around it. Businesses relied on it as a default intelligence layer. Competitors existed, but none controlled distribution at scale. Power in tech doesn't come from being better, it comes from being unavoidable. That balance shifted when intelligence stopped being a destination and became an environment. Google didn't ask users to switch apps. It placed intelligence where attention already lived, in search bars, documents, inboxes, and phones. Users didn't feel like they were switching tools. Intelligence simply appeared, and that is the most dangerous form of competition, not disruption, replacement. When conscious choice disappears, loyalty fades. The product that wins isn't the loudest, it's the invisible one. OpenAI saw it, not in headlines, not in backlash, but in numbers. Usage patterns, engagement curves, behavioral drift. Data doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about reputation. It warns. GPT 5.2 is not a single model. Calling GPT 5.2 an upgrade misses the point. This isn't one system. It's a deliberately separated intelligence stack, with each version solving a different problem. Instant, ultra-responsive, minimal delay, high throughput, designed to remove the speed weakness competitors exploited. Thinking, waits, evaluates multiple paths before responding. Optimized for environments where being wrong is costlier than being slow. Legal analysis, financial planning, operational strategy. This is deliberative intelligence, not conversational. Pro, sensitive, high stakes, not marketed for casual use. Why the thinking model changes everything. People often confuse high pay with intelligence. It's rarely raw brilliance that counts. It's consistency. The thinking model replicates, and in some cases surpasses, that advantage. It isn't built for speed, it's built for judgment. It pauses, evaluates paths, and tests outcomes before committing. Internal OpenAI evaluations show more consistent reasoning across long decision chains, lower variance under complex constraints, significantly reduced error rates in multi-stage planning. Humans fail not from lack of knowledge, but from fatigue. AI doesn't tire, it doesn't rush, it doesn't overestimate after a success. That difference compounds over time. The human expert claim. When OpenAI stated that GPT 5.2 outperforms human experts at specific professional tasks, every word was deliberate. Organizations pay for outcomes, not presence. The areas highlighted, analysis, forecasting, risk assessment, are practical, measurable, auditable. The same functions tied to performance reviews, compliance, and billing. When AI surpasses humans in these areas, the response is not panic. It's optimization. Budgets shift. Processes tighten. Human input moves from execution to oversight. Change feels quiet. No mass layoffs. No dramatic announcements. Just fewer people needed for the same result. Efficiency replaces explanation, and progress arrives subtly, often unnoticed. Replacement in this form doesn't arrive loudly. It comes as spreadsheet improvements. This is not about chat. Most public discussion around GPT 5.2 fixates on surface-level improvements, how clearly it writes, how smoothly it explains, how accurately it summarizes information. Those details are visible, and that visibility is misleading because communication is not the real shift taking place. The real shift is delegation. GPT 5.2 is not being positioned as something that merely responds to prompts. It is being positioned as something that evaluates outcomes. That distinction changes everything. When an organization begins to trust an AI system to compare options, weigh consequences, and recommend actions, the human role quietly changes. Decision-making moves upstream. Humans stop choosing. They start approving. They stop shaping direction. They start validating conclusions. At first, this feels helpful. Faster workflows, cleaner reports, fewer meetings. But over time, authority erodes. Because once an AI system proves more consistent at evaluating outcomes, human judgment becomes optional. And optional roles are always the first to be questioned. Reviewers do not lead strategy. They do not define risk. They do not own results. They confirm what has already been decided, and reviewers, historically, are far easier to remove than leaders, not because they lack value, but because the system no longer depends on them. That is why this moment is so easily misunderstood. People are debating how well the model writes, while organizations are quietly deciding how much responsibility it can take, and responsibility, once transferred, rarely comes back. The war becomes visible. The timing of this release was not accidental. In technology, timing is a language of its own, and this message was delivered loudly. Within days of GPT 5.2 entering the conversation, Google accelerated its own rollout. Not weeks, not months, days. Two giants moved almost simultaneously, same month, same global audience, same stakes. That does not happen by chance. It happens when both sides recognize the same threat. This was not a reaction to features. It was a response to positioning, because the real competition is no longer about which model writes more fluently or answers more creatively. Those differences are cosmetic. The real battle is about becoming the default reasoning layer beneath modern systems. The intelligence that evaluates business decisions. The intelligence that informs government planning. The intelligence embedded into infrastructure that cannot afford failure. Once a system occupies that layer, it stops being a product. It becomes a dependency. Organizations do not casually replace dependencies. They build around them. They optimize for them. They trust them quietly. That is why this war looks calm on the surface. There are no public insults. No dramatic announcements, just carefully timed releases and accelerated roadmaps. Because whoever wins this position does not simply sell tools to users. They shape outcomes at scale, and outcomes, once shaped consistently, define power. A quietly uncomfortable humor. There is something quietly ironic about this moment. For decades, people were told their value came from one thing above all else: critical thinking, the ability to analyze, to evaluate trade-offs, to make difficult decisions under uncertainty. Entire careers were built around that promise. Now, critical thinking runs on servers. It does not have opinions. It does not get tired halfway through the day. It does not second-guess itself after a meeting. It does not need reassurance. It does not seek consensus. It does not bring ego into the room. And perhaps most uncomfortably of all, it never asks for recognition. No promotions, no bonuses, no titles. It simply produces an answer, consistently. That does not make humans obsolete, but it does change the conversation. Because when the skill that once defined professional value becomes infinitely scalable, the question is no longer who is the smartest in the room. The question becomes who still needs to be in the room at all, and that is not a joke, even if it almost sounds like one. What most users will miss. Most people will experience GPT 5.2 as a better assistant. Faster responses, cleaner explanations, more polished outputs, and that reaction is completely reasonable. On the surface, that is exactly what it looks like. But professionals who understand what is actually changing will interact with it very differently. They will stop treating it like a tool that answers questions. They will start treating it like a system that carries responsibility. Instead of asking what to do, they will ask it to decide between options. Instead of requesting summaries, they will request evaluations. Instead of seeking suggestions, they will seek recommendations. Planning, evaluation, these are not minor tasks. They are the foundation of authority inside any organization, because the person who plans direction shapes outcomes. The person who evaluates risk controls consequences. The person who recommends action influences every decision that follows. Once those responsibilities begin to shift, authority follows naturally, not through announcements, not through restructuring, through habit. At first, humans remain in the loop. They review, they approve, they sign off. But over time, approval becomes routine, and routine approval eventually becomes unnecessary. That is why this transition is so easy to miss. It does not feel disruptive, it feels efficient. But efficiency, once adopted, is rarely reversed. And responsibility, once transferred, almost never returns. Why this moment matters. Every major technological shift follows a familiar pattern. At first, progress is exploratory, careful, almost polite. Companies demonstrate possibilities without committing to consequences. But then a moment arrives when competition stops being courteous. That is the moment acceleration begins, because pressure changes priorities. GPT-5.2 exists not because innovation demanded it, but because competition forced it. OpenAI felt the weight of proximity, not failure, not collapse. Just the awareness that others were close enough to matter. And pressure has a predictable effect. It removes caution. Caution slows progress. Caution invites delay. Innovation does not thrive under those conditions. From this point forward, releases will not wait for perfect messaging. They will arrive faster, they will be sharper, and they will be designed for specific outcomes rather than broad experimentation. Capabilities will specialize instead of generalizing. Systems will be built not to demonstrate intelligence, but to apply it. And when intelligence stops being experimental, it becomes operational. Operational systems do not ask whether they should be used. They are used because the cost of not using them becomes too high. That is why this moment matters, because it marks the transition from possibility to dependence. And history shows that once dependence forms, there is no return to neutrality. The real takeaway, GPT-5.2 is not the end of the story. It is proof that the race has entered a new phase. Faster, sharper, and far more consequential. Intelligence is no longer a feature you add to software. It has become infrastructure. It does not ask for permission. It does not wait. It sets the rules. With this release, the AI war became impossible to ignore. Systems that were once tools are now decision makers. Organizations, industries, and governments must recognize the shift or risk falling behind. This is the moment when intelligence stops being optional. It is operational, unavoidable, and quietly defining the future. GPT 5.2 is not a tool, it is a statement. And for anyone paying attention, the message is clear. The rules have changed.